Hello, everybody. It's James here with WSI with this week's guest, and it is my pleasure to introduce this week's guest for many reasons. Not just because he was the sadist in sequence, not just because he beat the shit out of Jimmy Savile that time, not just because he's one of the toughest men in wrestling history, but he's also in the same time zone as me, the first guest ever to be in the same time zone as me. So we're at the same time, brilliant stuff, and also accompanied by Miss Linda. It is Adrian Street. How are you guys?
Oh, doing great, thanks, James. How are you doing?
Take two. That was.
You doing another one?
No, I'll leave that with that. I think I'll leave that for now. Then, because we're in the same time zone, I can actually ask some UK-based questions. But before I do, I've got to ask: how come you two guys ended up moving back to Wales a few years ago after like nearly 40 years in Florida or wherever?
Yeah, family. That's what it was really. Because we hardly ever saw them, they'd come over every so often, 10 years or something like that, and really we missed it, and eventually we missed home.
In February as well. How could you?
Yeah,
How could you miss here?
yeah, apart from the fact I had grandkids and everything like that that I hadn't seen yet, and very much wanted to. I love the beaches. I love the beaches in Florida and warm weather and all the rest of it. But there's one thing I liked more, and that was the Welsh mountains. I love the Welsh. I love the Welsh mountains and that sort of thing. And not only that, when Trump got in, that kind of that was like a deciding factor for us. So I said, Linda, I think we'll get out of this country before they replace Donald Trump with Donald Duck. But it seems to me that they have.
Fair enough. Then the reason I got in contact with you guys is because I was talking to Dirty Dutch Mantel, who I've spoken to a few times now, and he, waxed lyrical on how great he thought you guys were as an act, how tough Adrian was, and how almost brave it was to be in the South with a flamboyant gimmick such as the Exotic one was. But before we get into the whole career, I'm going to start with British wrestling, and then we'll go into the American wrestling, and we'll see how much we get through, because I've written 1,000 hours worth of questions for a 2-hour interview. But before I do, NXT UK. Dutch had told me that you were working with NXT UK, and I hadn't realised. So could you explain what you do with them, or what you did with them, and what your role is with the young guys?
Oh, what's your role in? We work for NXT UK, didn't we?
We did what?
We worked for NXT New York.
Oh yeah, yeah. I had an offer from Vince McMahon to work for them for the WWE a number of years ago, but I declined. I turned that offer down because I didn't like what he had in mind for me. But yes, we went and trained with the guys in the NXT, and they made a video of us as well. So that's sort of out and about and everything at the moment. Also, Joanne Randalls has made she made a video of us and what have you, like a documentary. And the idea is she wants to make a feature film called Adrian on my life story. So, we're kind of looking forward to that.
Is your work with NXT UK ongoing, continuing weekly, or was it just a few one-offs as like a guest trainer almost?
Oh, that was just then.
It was just a one-off.
Yeah, that was just a one-off. They wanted me to sort of train with their guys and sort of show them a few odds and ends, how to dismantle people. And basically they wanted to do the documentary. That's the main reason that they had me.
Right.
sort of travel up to the training centre.
I've got you. With we'll leave the new stuff. We'll go straight back to the old stuff and from the beginnings. But before we do, I live in Stockport. You must have wrestled in the Stockport Plaza
Oh
a
yeah,
couple of times.
in actual fact, we live not far from there. At one time, I actually bought 6 houses in Manchester. The largest of them had
About 49 rooms. isn't it?
49 rooms. Yeah,
Where was
yeah.
that?
I mean, for a period, we lived in Manchester more than I lived in London.
Hmm.
But eventually, I sold up all those things, and we bought a 12th century house in Tinton that was actually a granary. It used to be a granary back in the 12th century. They ground the bread up and everything like that that fed the workers and the priests and what have you, that actually built Tinton Abbey, which was right opposite my house. In fact, to look at when we were in bed, to actually look at the window framed Tinton Abbey, which was on the other side of the Wye River, and we actually owned half a mile of the riverbank.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm currently in property. I have a few houses at the moment, and it's man, it's gone crazy these last couple of years. House prices. I don't know how any kids are going to be able to afford a house unless they've got rich parents.
Yeah.
I know it's terrible. Isn't it?
We live in Cumbrawn now, and the reason I actually bought this house was, for one thing, it backs onto the woods. Within 10 minutes, I can be on the beginning of trails that lead right up into the mountain from the front of my house, and from the back of my house, which is out that way. We got the most fantastic views. We can look right over Cumbrawn, but not only that, we can look right over the River Severn, and we can actually see England over the other side of the River Severn from here. And I mean, come bonfire night, we watch firework displays in England as well as in Wales.
I end up going whenever there's a bonfire display or fireworks. There's I don't know if you know where New Mills is, sort of the Macclesfield area, where it's the beginning of the peaks. I go there, and then I can watch at 12 o'clock at New Year's Eve all the fireworks over Manchester go off at the same time. Brilliant. And I really scored big with my girlfriend the first year I took her as well, so she thought it was a romantic gesture.
I think you've got nice blue eyes.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, pretty blue eyes. Got that. And nice taste.
Thank you. All mine as well. Well, she's a lucky lady, my missus.
I've got all my own taste, and I also had a few others stuck in my elbow.
Well, I'm good. In fact, that's probably going to be one of the first questions I'm going to ask you. Actually, is when we're going back to the wrestling side of things. Is your story is pretty well documented. You were basically there was no option really apart from to work in the coal mines, and you always dreamed bigger than your surroundings, and you end up going to London to seek out your fortune like Dick Whittington in the classic way. But when did you realise that you were not just like a tough kid growing up? When did you realise you were like the toughest in your area, and you knew how to handle yourself, and you could take this to the professional ranks?
I think it's because people always told me that I couldn't do certain things. You tell me I can't do something that I've got my heart set on, and you'll eat my dust, because the thing is, I'm always determined to do it. I had a very bad relationship with my father. He was one of the nastiest people I've ever met in my life. and he told me I'd never make it. Anytime the things were so tough, anytime anything was so blatantly tough and everything like that, I'd always say to myself, my father would be pleased if I failed. In spite of the fact we never liked each other, I would say my father was a deciding factor and made me as tough as I was. It was like a boy named Sue.
I know it well.
Yeah. You know what I mean? There was no way on earth that he was going to see me fail. So every time anything seemed impossible, just thinking about him made it possible.
As far as the grappling goes, did you ever? When did you start getting trained more formally in, hooking or really learning how to lay it in and look after yourself in that way in a more formal setting?
Well, the thing is, when I was brought up in South Wales, back in then, it was like the old Wild West. Who was the fastest gun? For whatever reason, people were admired if they could beat everybody else up. And the thing is, I had no shortage of people who were challengers and people I could challenge, because in those days, there was like the Abergavenny boys, they were farmers. They'd come up looking for our girls, and we didn't like that. We'd always get into fights with the farmers. The miners themselves, I was having fights with different miners and everything like that for quite a while until they realized that they'd get their asses kicked. But also, there was a lot of Romani gypsies in that area. And as you know, the gypsies are the toughest people ever. You get mixed up with one of them. I remember having a fight with a guy, they used to call him Harry the Gyppo. He was much smaller than me, even though he was like many years older. He was about 18 when I was 13, and he absolutely cleaned my clock. He punched me in the face and spread my face all over the place. A number of years I got even with him in a toilet of a cinema. He was midway through having a pee, and I smashed his head into the tiles. I kicked him all over the place. There was actually blood on the ceiling. But you do me wrong, I'll get you.
What was the film playing? Do you remember?
I can't remember the movie now.
It's immaterial to the story. I just thought I'd just ask. There's bad information out there that you trained in the snake pit in Wigan, but that's not true, is it?
No. I mean, I wrestled with lots of people from the snake pit. I mean, you wrestle with one of them. If you couldn't look after yourself, you're up shit's creek without a paddle. They were tough. And you had to learn. You had to learn to be a great wrestler, because if you couldn't take it, if you couldn't take a hold, they certainly wouldn't allow you to do it. So you had to be good. And the thing is, at that particular time, wrestling really started to boom in Britain. It was about the same time that the joint promotions start showing TV, and with that, they went from running joint promotions went from running 700 shows a year in Britain to 4,500. They were actually running 4,500 shows between the whole of joint promotions at one time, and they needed bodies. Quite honestly, that's how I got my break. It wasn't until then that I actually started wrestling for joint promotions. They needed bodies. I tried to work for them for years, and they just kept turning me away. But when it did that, then they needed somebody that knew how to put their boots on. And the thing is, I was wrestling. I was wrestling 8 or 9 times. I was wrestling 40 times a month.
And
So I was wrestling more than once in one day and all the rest of it. And you can bet your life that during a week, I would be wrestling with a Wiganer like every other night. You had to be tough or die. And the thing is, you had to get really stuck in, because if you couldn't really show you could look after yourself with joint promotions, they drop you like a hot brick. So you had to be good or get fired.
So you never had like a formal trainer, or you never trained somewhere for years. You basically just learned how to wrestle by wrestling the best.
Yes. I had a guy that trained me in submission wrestling, Mike Dimitri. He was my manager for a couple of years. And he was a junior heavyweight champion of the world in shoot wrestling. Straight wrestling. I learned quite a bit with him. But I would say the guy that I learned the most from was George Kidd, who, as far as I'm concerned, was the best technical wrestler ever that I've ever come across in all my years. I was in the business for over 70 years.
Give me some more information about George Kidd, because what made him so tough, and you obviously very enamoured with him and respected him. Why was he so great in your eyes?
What?
Why was he so great in your eyes, George Kidd?
He was the most fantastic. He was the most fantastic technical wrestler. You actually put a hold on him, and you were putting yourself in jeopardy. And the thing is, I learned so much. In the early days, before I did that, I would actually have like a submission hold in my mind that I wanted to put on somebody. If they go on the defensive, it's it's really hard to apply it. You'd be surprised how difficult it is to put a submission hold on somebody that's backing off, right? So the thing is, Napoleon Bonaparte said it best: never interrupt an enemy when they're making a mistake. Now, what I would do is put myself in harm's way. I purposely put myself in harm's way, and I learned from George Kidd that you feel them out and you can see where they were going. You'd actually let them sort of have something, but you'd have a counterhold. George Kidd was a master of counterholds. You touch him and you find yourself in a knot. And I learned a lot of that from him. But also, I'd learned an awful lot from fighting, not wrestling, not boxing, fighting with the gypsies and with the miners and with the farm boys. I've got so many ways to hurt you, you'd have to invent new ways to scream.
Going away from like the shooters, who were the guys when you were breaking into wrestling that you admired for their showmanship, and who drew your eyeballs in as a fan that made you want to emulate them in the late 50s when you were getting into the business?
The first one ever was Donnelly O'Jonathan, an American wrestler, a Mormon giant. He was enormous, but I really admired him. In fact, when I first started wrestling for the independents, I used to wrestle as Kid Tarson Jonathan, because that was like a tribute to him. But another one that I really admired was Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. There's been lots of Nature Boys. As far as I was concerned, he was the original. He was the only one. You get Ric Flair claiming that he's like the most famous Nature Boy and all the rest of it. Maybe he is, maybe and all the rest of it. But I was wrestling all over Europe as a Nature Boy 17 years before Ric Flair ever had his first match. So there you go.
When did you ever meet Buddy Rogers? Because he was in Florida in the 70s.
In actual fact, believe it or not, he bought a ticket to come and watch me. It's funny because I'm in the dressing room, and wrestlers are the biggest ribbers and fibbers and everything like that you wish to come across. I was in a dressing room in Florida, and somebody, a security guy came in, and he said, "Oh, excuse me, Mr. Street." He says, "Is it okay for?" He said, "Buddy Rogers is outside, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. He wanted to come backstage and meet you. Is it okay?" So I looked at him. I said, "Yeah." I said, "But listen, tell Queen Elizabeth and the Pope that they're going to have to wait their turn in that case." I thought it was like one of the wrestlers and put him up to it, like as a rib. Next thing, I said, "Yeah, like let him in." Next thing is I was face to face with Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. That night we became very good friends. And I couldn't believe my luck. But I can actually go one better than that. Linda and I have been together since 1969. But we never actually got married until 2005. We got married in a penthouse of the Riviera Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas at the Cauliflower Alley Club. Don Leo Jonathan was there, and I'd never met him before in my life. This is 2005. I mean, 30 odd years before, I was Kid Tarzan Jonathan. I'd never met him. This was the first time. I told him the story, and I asked him if he'd be my best man. Don Leo Jonathan was my best man when Linda and I got married. And I hadn't even proposed to her at that particular time. This was the night before I proposed, and I wasn't even sure if she wanted to get married, even though we've been together for all those years. Now, as if that wasn't enough, the guy that gave her away was the first promoter that I ever wrestled for in the States. The guy that married us was an ordained Catholic bishop, but he used to be a professional wrestler, and he wrestled as a Wolfman.
Oh. He didn't turn up in costume, did he? Didn't have the Wolfman thing when he married you?
I'd already lost my hair by then because of the cancer treatment. I had a long blonde wig, and I wore a black velvet suit with birds of paradise down the sleeves and down the trouser legs. It's the same suit I had made in, I had custom made in Granny Takes a Trip in Kings Road, Chelsea. It's the same suit that Elton John tried to buy before I went in there to pick it up. Elton John knew exactly who I was because we used to go to the same club. And the guy there said, "I daren't sell you that. It belongs to Adrian Street." He said, "No way." He said, "I'm not going to risk that." Elton John said, "I don't think I'll risk it either." But he had one made that was similar, but instead of birds of paradise, he had like musical notes. And that's where he got the idea from that. Also, I think that Ziggy Stardust was actually based on my character.
Well, that's something else I was going to ask you. I will leave that for now because I'll bring it when we bring in the exotic character as well. But before we move on, I did want to ask you one more question about Buddy Rogers. And when I speak to Don Morocco and he tells me about Buddy Rogers, he tells me that Buddy was everything he was on screen and more. Just the swagger, the confidence, everything. Was that how you found Buddy to be as well?
He was an amazing guy. He was a really good friend of mine. I did a rock show and he actually came to see me. Lou says came to see the show as well. There was a guy took a photograph of the three of us together because I'd been world champion. Lou says was world champion. Buddy Rogers had been world champion. And he still to this day has never given me that photograph. So we've actually fell out over that with that particular photographer. But anyway, he was fantastic. And unfortunately, a number of years later, he was supposed to come out to the Cauliflower Alley Club and I was going to meet him again. That would have been the last time that I would have met him. Unfortunately, just before that, he was in a supermarket doing some shopping, and one of his old lady fans, oh, she couldn't believe it, is Buddy Rogers like walking around because you would notice him, even walking around. Anyway, she come running up and everything like that. Oh, Buddy, can I have your autograph? She signed her autograph for her and everything like that. But she was getting flustered and all, like while she was doing it. And she dropped a cheesecake on the floor. Right? So anyway, Buddy signed her autograph with a flourish, went off to give her like the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers strut. He stepped on the cheesecake, slipped up, landed on his elbow, that messed it all up, and he ended up having a heart attack and dying.
Oh, really? So, like a broken elbow led to a heart attack, blinking, yeah.
Mm.
I will.
So he never came there, and I never got to see him for the last time.
No, that is a shame. I will. I'll move on to something that I hope you can help me answer. Is in the late 50s, early 60s, when you were still a rookie in the business, you obviously saw the rise of Joint Promotions and Dale Martin and all those guys. What was the business like in the UK in the 60s as far as... Because it strikes me like people tell stories about the NWA in America from the 50s to the 80s. It was like a monopoly. Whereas, as far as I can tell, Joint Promotions had the bigger monopoly in this country.
Yes. Yeah, they did because they had TV. It was TV that really gave them the monopoly. I mean, Joint Promotions was the biggest promotion anyway. Like you combined promoters like to all together and use the same wrestlers and what have you. And the thing is, too, you had to be tough in those days. People say like, "Oh, was wrestling fixed? Was it fake?" Very often it was fixed. The promoters decided who would win, but it was not fake. Absolutely was not fake. You went in there, you would wrestle your ass off. Let me sort of... That time when they got TV, Britain was a mecca of pro wrestling. You got sambo wrestlers from Russia. You got the oil wrestlers from Turkey. You got a myriad of different Oriental, like judo, jiu-jitsu, this, that, and the other. You got a Brazilian, sambo wrestlers, and what have you. There was some fantastic talent that actually came to this country. Now the thing is, they wanted to make a name for themselves. In order to bring those people here, joint promotions had to pay their fares, had to give them top wages to actually induce them to come here and everything in the first place. And they were diving in here from all different directions. Now, in order to get their money back, those guys needed to be winners. So they're not gonna want them to lose. They're an investment. They want to make their money back, right? So the thing is, very often you'd be asked to lose to those guys. You might be going to get your hand raised at the end of the thing, but not in my backyard, mate. So the thing is, when we went in there, I'll use myself as an example. I would kick their ass from the beginning to the end. That's not fake. That's bloody real. They knew exactly what I was trying to do. So you would go in the ring and have a real fight on your hands. It was real, mate. Real. And the thing is, the reason I would do it, two reasons. One is, I'm not having that guy showing me up. As far as I'm concerned, I want to be a star. I'm not putting him over as a star. Now, the promoters would be watching because they want to see what they bought with a foreigner. They see me kick his ass and all the rest of it. I'd be on with him again next week. Hey, you win. They'd give me the win because they know the guy couldn't stand with me.
And then you'd give them a bit more of the match, or would you just beat them as mercilessly?
Yeah. To an extent.
Yeah. In your book, one of your many books, you've got 7 out there. Is it 7 books you've written? Yeah, in one of your 7 books, I Only Laugh When It Hurts, you describe being introduced to a man called Jeff Moran before wrestling him. Now, I've heard that that's actually quite unusual, because obviously the good guys would be in the good guy locker room, the bad guys would be in the bad guy locker room. And I was led to believe, for the most part, you would never actually even interact before being in the ring with each other. Is that mostly true?
I didn't know. I didn't know what they were talking about when they were saying, like, you go over. I just thought that he was saying to my opponent, I think this guy is going to be good. I think he's got your match. You know, I think he's going to give you bother. Now my opponent's saying, like, oh, I've got a reputation here, like I can't lose. I didn't understand the conversation. This was the first time I'd ever wrestled. We were in the ring. I tore him to bleeding pieces and dislocated his shoulder in about 2 minutes of the first round. And it was like the main event. First pro match I ever had was main event. Because he was a big name. He was like a big fish in a little pond. It was only a small promotion. We went back to the dressing room. I strutted in there. When am I going to get a championship match? They said, what the effing hell were you doing out there? You know, people are going to pay good money to see a main event in the last 2 minutes. The guy's wife came in the dressing room and called me a stupid, clumsy bastard. I mean, in those days, you did not call a Welshman a bastard. I said to her, if you were a man, I'd punch your head off. You foul mouth. Get out of it. Go and sort of. She was crying. My opponent was crying, and I took him to hospital. He had another job as a window cleaner, and I dislocated his shoulder.
Oh, no.
But the promoter came up to me. Everybody in the dressing room was giving me dirty looks and all the rest of it. I was going to get £2, 10 shillings for that fight. He came up. He said, "I can't give you." He said, "I'll give you £2, kid." He said, "And be thankful I give you that." He said, "You know, he said, you know, you can't do sort of stuff like that." He said, "But listen, you're going to do me a favor." He said, "I had your opponent build all over like the southern area." He said, "You're going to have to help me out. You're going to have to wrestle instead of him. You know, you're going to have to sub for him." I said, "Count me in." It would have been like something I had scraped, like something you scraped off his shoe.
How long did it take for you to be fully let into the more cooperative nature of professional wrestling then? That you're not
But
out to kill each other?
he told me if I wanted to work for him anymore, I'd have to go to a wrestling school near the Old Kent Road. What was it called? Johnny Kilroy. Johnny Kilroy had a gym on the Old Kent Road near the Elephant and Castle. He told me to go there, and he gave me a message. He said, I'll call Johnny Kilroy, expect him to tell him to expect you. When you go in there, this is what I've got to say to him. I didn't understand what I was saying, but I said, he told me to say, teach me to die. And that was like react. If somebody hit me, I wouldn't sort of, I mean, I might be seeing stars, but I wouldn't portray it. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
you show no weakness. You have a poker face.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Never mind what they did to me. I wouldn't grunt, I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't make any noise at all. I just grit my teeth and punch their lights out.
I will.
So
Sorry.
that is it. But even then, I went in there, and there was a lot of people. How can I say it? Nobody in those days wanted you. Other wrestlers did not want new guys coming in. Because every time you had a match, it was a match that maybe they could have had. I tell you what, back in those days, it was a very, very tough business to get into.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to move on, and I'm going to ask you about your most famous persona. Where exactly did the exotic character come from? Because before you answer, I'll like to stress, because most of the views are American, is that in Britain, in the UK, we have a big history of, like comedy drag acts and pantomime and men dressing as women. It was a done thing for, comedy and everything for many decades. So was there anybody famous that basically inspired your dress, your costume, the way you did your hair, and made the exotic character come to life?
That's a good question. Exactly. I'll give you the whole 9 yards. Right. I was getting over as a wrestler. I was starting to register and all the rest of it. But the thing is, I'm not very big. And in those days, a lighter wrestler, if you wasn't a heavyweight, you were like a third-class citizen, more or less. A lot of the heavyweights used to say, like, this isn't a business for small guys. You got to be. A lot of the heavyweights too wouldn't have been much bigger than me if they hadn't got so fat. But I had a 27-inch waist, which I wanted to look after. I had a good body, and I couldn't afford to be too heavy. Although I did try to put as much weight on as I could, but I was just too active in those days that it just didn't work for me. So the thing is, you had to do something. And I thought to myself, what actually happened is I tried to get a fight with a gypsy, fighter and everything like that, because his handlers were offering a lot of money. And they turned around and said to me, "You're not famous enough." And I thought to myself, no, I'm not famous enough. What can I do to make myself noticed? But at the same time, I start, whenever we travel, like in a coach, different places, different venues, they stop on the way, like it's some greasy spoon, and the guys go in there and have their dinner. I wouldn't eat that stuff. I take my own lunch with me. some baked chicken, some salad, fruit, and stuff like that. And while they were in the Greasy Spoon, I would walk and run along the road as far as I could. I was in like strict training all the time.
Were you not a big drinker as well? Were you teetotal on the road for the most part?
Hmm?
Were you not a big drinker? You didn't drink?
No, no, no. I mean, no, not in those days at all. But anyway, I drink milk and fruit juice or water. And all the food I had was like really clean. And I'd walk and run along the road towards the venue. Like, I mean, it might be miles away and everything like that. The same route as the thing. When they'd finished eating and everything like that, they'd get in they'd get back in the van and they'd pick me up along the way. And they were always saying, hey, come on, somebody's picked you up. You couldn't have got this far. And I used to get a kick out of that, like, you know, like ego boost and all the rest of it. Anyway, it got to the years of a guy called Charles Maskell. Charles Maskell was a writer for Joint Promotions for Dale Martin's. He had an office up in the, you know, where Dale Martin's offices were. And he used to write the programs and write for magazines and different stuff like that. And it was him that actually, because of that, and the way I was training, he actually called me Nature Boy. Oh, I couldn't believe it. I'd always look at the posters whenever I went to a town. When I was getting up to the arena, I'd look for the posters to see if they said anything about me. You know, like what they actually said. It is usually like Fast and Furious or something like along those lines. Nothing in particular. But anyway, I walked up and one time it actually said Nature Boy Adrian Street. Oh, I couldn't believe it. And the thing is, I almost panicked. I thought to myself, I've got to live up. What can I do to live up to that name? What's Nature Boy Buddy Rogers got that I haven't got? It was the look. The blonde hair, the fancy jackets and robes. I shot out, designed a jacket that I wanted and got this lady to make it for me. It was like a powder blue velvet thing. I got boots, powder blue boots to match, trunks to match. When I took the powder blue velvet thing off, it had a silver lame lining. And I was going to do something about my hair. I got some bleach. I was married at that time to not this is before I knew Linda. I was actually married at the time. I went home and said to my ex-wife, well, she was my wife at the time, bleach my hair. I want my hair bleached. And that's how I turned up. Right. 27-inch waist, 48-inch chest, bleach blonde hair, a fancy jacket. You wouldn't see any boots, anybody wearing boots in this country at that time, unless they were black or brown, and little short ones. These were taller boots, the American style. Wrestlers in those days were like bigger piss takers than the coal miners were back in Wales years ago. But I had plenty of practice, always had the last word whenever anybody sort of said anything to me. You're not going in a ring looking like that, are you? Oh my God, like, you know. Anyway, I went out there. Now I imagined the crowd were going to go like, oh, isn't Adrian Street like a fantastic, oh, what a great looking little athlete and everything like that. And that would, thank goodness they didn't. I was horrified at the reception, but thank God they did it. Because I always throw it back in people's faces like any piss taking, everything like that. Straight into the ring. Whoa, Mary, give us a kiss. Ooh, isn't she nice? So I come back like, I wouldn't give you a kiss, you big fat bastard. Ooh, Mary, like, give us a kiss. I wouldn't kiss you like you're too effeminate for me. I like my men more manly. I'm on my way to the ring and I look now and my opponent's getting in on the act. He's giving it all this and sort of, he made a mistake of turning round when I got in the ring. I ran across the ring, groped him at the backside. He jumped up in the air, turned around, I give him a kiss. I was throwing it back in their faces, but really and truly, I was so upset. But the more upset I got, the more outrageous I got.
How long?
So I went back to the dressing room on the way back. I'm thinking to myself, I can't go in the ring. I can't go back in the dressing room and show the promoters, and show the other wrestlers. So I'm upset.
How long? While you're blowing your nose, I'll ask this. Sorry.
That's what I meant to do. Can you imagine? You walk into a party and you think you're going to make an entrance. You slip on. Somebody drops some sherry truffle on the floor. You slip over it, or slip over a banana skin, fall first in the sherry trifle. You come up with two pineapple rings in your eyes, and everybody's laughing like it's your entrance. You go like, "Oh yeah, I meant to do that." You know what I mean? At least it takes the heat off and makes you look less silly.
Well, I've got two questions actually. Is how long since that initial, what would become the exotic Adrian? How long did it take for you to be fully comfortable being the exotic Adrian Street? And how long did it take for you to fully hone in your act?
I decided because, I thought to myself, the reaction I got was not the reaction I was looking for. But it was a hell of a lot more reaction than anybody else got that night. And I wanted more of it. I'm a sucker for attention. That's why I didn't like the coal mine. It's dark down there, and I was made to be seen.
And with all the soot on your face, you look like everybody else, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, I kept pushing the envelope. Whenever the people started to sort of accept what I was giving them, I needed to give them more. So to start off with, I put like a little bit of makeup on. So when I'm walking by, people would go like, is he wearing makeup? And they didn't know if I was or if I wasn't. But then later on, like I say, I had to keep pushing the envelope. Later on, it got to be obvious I was wearing makeup, and I started sticking sequins on my face, rhinestones. But then I got a part in the movie, A Drink Out of the Bottle for BBC Two. They wanted my character, they wanted me, but they wanted to actually exaggerate what I was already doing. So up until then, I wouldn't wear lipstick because otherwise I want to, that is too puffy. You know what I mean? I'm not, I was willing to go exotic, but not. But anyway, that's what they wanted. And the thing is, after they did the movie was it was a movie for BBC TV. It was a great success. It really got over. It was actually written by Brian Glover, who used to wrestle as Leon Harris. He actually wrote the play.
Yeah, he was in an American Werewolf in London as well, Brian Glover, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it. But anyway, after that, people actually expected me now to be So I started going the whole 9 yards. I mean, I'd wear red lipstick, pink lipstick, silver lipstick, gold lipstick, green lipstick, green sparkles. I got to be as exotic as I could be. There'd be butterflies. I painted like an exotic glittering butterfly on my face, lipstick, everything, and I started tying my hair up.
When did you notice that you were now being featured in more main events as the exotic, and also when did you start getting a pay rise? How long after the character was formed that you saw the benefits of it?
Well, that was it really. I mean, with that, I started asking for a pay rise, and I made a good move by going up wrestling for the northern promoters, because mostly I just wrestled in the south for Dale Martins. But I went up north and started wrestling first of all for writing promotions, like around the Manchester area and everything like that. Then over to Leeds and everything like that for George Royal Wisco Promotions. And when I started working for them, they automatically give me more money, and they pay my hotels and all that sort of stuff. So I'd go then to Dale Martins and say, hey, listen, I'm thinking of moving up north. I'm not coming down here because I'm getting a lot more money up there. I want more money. So they'd give me a couple more pounds. Then whenever they did, I'd go to the northern promoters and say, hey, listen, I'm getting this kind of money in London, where I live. But eventually they start trying to play my bluff, and that's why I started buying houses and everything like that to live in Manchester, to give them a signal like, oh, Adrian means that he's. But like eventually they wouldn't give me any more. They all got together at a meeting and everything like that, and part of the meeting was, we don't give him any more. That was it. So they told me I don't get any more, and although I was earning more money than most professional wrestlers at the time for joint promotions, I was kind of despondent about that. And when they told me that was it, okay, you get your rise, you get this rise now, it's the last one you're going to get. So they just give me a rise, but I wasn't happy with it when they told me that was it. And the funny thing is, coincidence, when I went home, Ulrich Williams, at a promotion, Wrestling Federation of Great Britain or whatever it was, he called me and asked me to go work for them, with him, but not just as a wrestler, as a partner. I would actually own half of the promotion.
Right.
So I said, what expenses are there? He said, well, the price of the hall, the price of the advertising, the price of getting the ring there, and the wages of the other wrestlers. After that, I get half of what comes in. We were going up to Scotland. I'd wrestled in Scotland for 5 days, which meant I wasn't working 40 times a month like I was for joint promotions. I was wrestling less, and I'd come home with like £900 for 5 matches. Which in those days doesn't sound much now, but in those days that was a hell of a lot of money.
No, yeah, it's a huge amount of money, especially for those days. Absolutely.
And I was the first one to actually do that and leave. Again, I was a Pied Piper. There were different promotions then. Jackie Powell left after and promoted his own shows. Kendo Nagasaki left and went with Star Promotions. Eric Taylor started promoting, and he got Les Kellett. So all the top stars actually followed me like the children or the rats in the Pied Piper.
It's funny. It's funny that that happens in so many, at least in American promotions as well. A star gets too big, and then they know their self-worth, and then they get involved with the company that they're working with on an ownership level, and and everybody's trying their best not to let that happen. But then some people are just too big to that they break through that glass ceiling. I shall move on to. I am very sorry to bring this up because I don't like asking the most obvious questions that you probably asked a million times before. But I asked some of the people who watch my show, what would you like Adrian to speak about? And the vast majority said Jimmy Savile. So I apologise about that, but I'm going to ask you a few questions. I'm actually going to go a little more in depth as well than usual. So I will tell you this then. So according to Savile himself, he was originally booked to be a referee, but wanted to wrestle. His first match was against Gentleman Jim Lewis, who had no mercy and beat him up at least 5 matches, apparently. Savile claims to have appeared on 107 cards. 106 were sellouts between the late 1950s and early 1970s, and he also says that he lost his first 35 matches. First time you heard Jimmy Savile was trying to get into the wrestling business?
He started off wrestling for Jimmy Lewis. Gentleman Jim Lewis taught him to wrestle as best he could. Gentleman Jim Lewis wasn't that marvelous a wrestler. But anyway, to actually use his fame, his name, would draw crowds. Because in those days, Jimmy Savile was really over. Everybody, they didn't know what he was. They thought he was marvelous. Jim will fix it and all that sort of stuff. But it's him that brought him into the business. But then when wrestling started to get so popular, with joint promotions, Gentleman Jim Lewis actually got some work with them and introduced Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile did all kinds of funny stuff for promotion to put himself over as a tough guy. I think he did like the basic training with the Royal Marines and lots of different sort of stuff like that. And now he claimed to be a professional wrestler. And of course, like Jimmy Lewis, Jimmy Lewis was like, other wrestlers called Jimmy Lewis the Grey Rat. You couldn't trust him any further than you could throw a bleeding steamroller. But anyway, he brought him in, introduced him. Dale Martins, for instance, never used him, and they wouldn't use him because they wanted to keep the business as straight as possible. And with something like that, how could you? You know what I mean?
Mm.
But anyway, Jimmy Savile really thought he was a tough guy.
Well, I'll ask you this then.
I don't actually remember. I don't actually remember being on the same card as him before. But anyway, I was wrestling in Sheffield.
I can't remember.
I think it was it was the ice rink.
Yeah, it was an ice rink.
Nottingham Ice Rink.
Ah, yes.
I was wrestling in Nottingham Ice Rink against George Kidd, who I've already told you I've got immense respect for. And he taught me more about real technical wrestling and shoot wrestling than anybody else, even more than Mike Dimitri. I wrestled with him in a non-title match at Nottingham Ice Rink, main event. Not only did I beat him, I beat him 2 straight submissions in about 7 minutes. And he ended up in the infirmary in Nottingham. He actually had to go to hospital.
Right.
He's gone into special training and they're doing like all the publicity and everything like that. When George Kidd comes back, Adrian Street's in for it and all the rest of it. This was going to be immense. This was going to be like the fight of the century. In the meantime, he's gone into special training. He couldn't be on the next show because he hadn't healed up enough by then. So what do? I'm on the next show. They throw Jimmy Savile in as my opponent. I mean, come on. And because he's a big name and all the rest of it at that time, promoter comes in, he says, Adrian, I want you to do, he said, you're wrestling with Jimmy Savile. I said, you're kidding. He said, no. He said, I want you to do a draw. You know, I want you to do a draw match with him. I don't want him beat.
Right before your big rematch with George Kidd as well.
You see the point.
Exactly, yeah.
This is a promoter, right, who'd been a professional wrestler himself. Ted Beresford is asking me to do that. I said, you've got to be bloody joking. Now, he said the wrong thing. He said, don't underestimate him, Adrian. He said he's been training with, you know, he's a tough guy, like, you know, he's been training with he done all this with the Royal Marines. As if he was going to intimidate me with something like that. I said, you're going to be bloody kidding. I said, he gets nothing. I said, what ever induced you? I said, I'm wrestling with George Kidd in a world title match on the next show. And you give me this? I said, no way. And Jimmy Savile was standing there. I said, nothing against you, mate. I said, you're not a wrestler. I said, you'll get nothing from me. I said, except hurt. That's it. So I warned you before we went in. Now, I always, as a heel, as a bad guy, I always preferred my opponent to go into the ring first. He goes into the ring, everybody cheers him, hooray, like blah, 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 blah. Then I make my entrance and they can boo and all the rest of it, and I'll do my thing, do my entrance and all that sort of stuff. Now the thing is, if you do it the other way around, I'll go in there, I'm not suddenly going to melt or disappear. It was better for me to come in second. It was better for my opponent too. Because the thing is, I'm not going to disappear in the corner while my opponent's making the entrance. So I'm still going to be strutting about. I'm still going to get the attention, at least if my opponent goes in first. You know, that's the way I like to do it. Bloody Ted Beresford double-crossed me. He come running up, he said, quick, Adrian, he said, like they're playing your music. I'd already told him he's going to go in first. They're playing your music, your opponent's already in the ring. So I went up, and it was like a hell of a place to make an entrance in Nottingham Ice Ring. You go up, the spotlights hit you and everything like that, and you come down the steps, and the people are all around, like looking down on the fun. The atmosphere you'd get from that would almost put a football bleeding crowd to shame. I mean, it really pump you up, you know. I mean, I'm up there, spotlights hit me and everything like that. I'm sort of looking. I looked down. The ring was empty. Jimmy Savile wasn't there. Between Jimmy Savile and the promoter, they did that on purpose. People see me now. What am I going to do? Run back in the dressing room? I've had to go through with it. So you can imagine now, I'm not happy camper. Not happy at all. I've gone down in there and everything like that, got in the ring. Jimmy Savile makes his entrance, people go nuts. I purposely won't look at him. Oh, I'm in the corner like, oh, just ignoring the entrance, everything like that. He comes in the ring and the people are still cheering all the rest of it. Now, I'm waiting for him to come in the ring, do whatever he's going to do. And then I'll go about doing my stuff, showing off, preening. I've still got my gown on, everything like that. I'm not going to take my gown off until he's in the dressing, until he's in there, and through the corner of my eye, I'll watch him take his. He came out aping me. He got like a fancy gown and all the rest of it. It's like a garish, like a cheap garish version of what I'm wearing. She's come in like mimicking me. How close are you fight with bloody flame for crying out loud? Anyway, through the corner of my eye, right, he's this rope. Now I'll do my stuff. So I've come out now and everything like that. And it's like the next time I looked at him, he's going to say, there you go. Damn, he's wearing another gown underneath. He did me. Not only that, underneath that, he was wearing another one. He had about 3 or 4 gowns. So I've taken my gown off. I've gone back in the corner and right. The bell went. Linda was in the audience. This is before she was wrestling. She was in the audience watching the match. She said, "You look like a hungry fox going after a frightened chicken." I ripped his hair out of his head. I mean, he dyed his hair that many times. It was all sort of scrawlish and wispy and everything anyway. Underneath the ring lights, you could see all wisps of his hair and everything falling around. I drop kicked him so hard, he landed on his head. I beat the crap out of him. I ripped him up off the floor. I kicked him, I smashed him, stomped on him and everything like that. And I put a submission on him that nearly broke his back. And they shuffled him out of the ring. That was the end of the contest.
How long did the match go for? What was the time?
He never, ever, ever wrestled again. But I'll add another little bit to the story. He actually had a nightclub in Bournemouth, I think it was. Down there somewhere, I think it was Bournemouth. And he used to get his wrestlers off Dale Martin's to wrestle down there. He desperately wanted me there because I was a big draw and I would fill his arena. And he was always there. Woo, 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 Jim will fix it and all that shit. At his club. The thing is, every time I was down there, I'd fill his arena, but he was never there. He'd never show up. I never actually set eyes on him again, ever. But, you know, at that time, we didn't know. He used to come in the dressing room and boast about all the girls that were lining up at his apartment. They'd be lining up his apartment, and he said, like, all these young girls, and he'd say, like, I'll take you, you, and you. The rest of you, you know, come back another time. You might get lucky. That's the kind of, and I mean, he boasted they were young girls, but we didn't realize how bloody young. We didn't realize they were children.
How long did the match go for then, bell to bell?
About I drew it out as long as I could because I was enjoying myself. I really don't know. It's probably maybe 2 or 3 rounds.
I'm surprised he got him for round 2 then. I mean, if that was me, I would have been off the stool and out the back in between rounds to not get any more of that.
Yeah, you can't leave the ring.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I will I will draw a close to this hour. We've booked a 2-hour interview slot. We've gone just about an hour now. So for now, that was the British section of the interview. We're going to have a little break. We'll do a part 2, and we'll do the American stuff. But for now, thank you very much, Adrian and Linda, and stay tuned for part 2.